Welcome, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Great. Thanks so much for being here for this session on education, sponsored by the Transylvania Partnership for Democracy. Again, very grateful for you here. Thank you for your interest in the topic and for your presence here tonight. Before we get cranking, I would like some opening remarks from our mayor. Mayor Koploff.
Thank you, Terry. You know, it is wonderful to be here and look out and see how many people are spending their Thursday evening not at Oscar Blues, not at a movie, not sitting home watching television, but coming out here because there are things that are just so important to us as individuals, important to us as good neighbors, important to us as a community. And to me as mayor, extremely important to me as mayor, and that's education. That is a foundational element of what we are as a society. And as a mayor, I want people that have critical thinking skills, that can analyze, that can question, that are curious, that want to be involved. That is what civic engagement is all about. And that is one of the foundations that is so important. And so I just want to welcome everybody. I just know that our community values what education brings to our children and to our community. And I really look forward to an interesting evening of ideas, of values, of discussion. And I just so appreciate having the Partnership for Democracy here because we have got to question and we have got to take time out of our busy lives to focus on what is really important. And education is so important. Without that, you can't build all of the other critical structures that we need as society. So thank you. As mayor, I'm excited to see so much of our community here this evening.
Thank you, Mayor. Are there any other elected officials here tonight? Are there any other appointed city administrators or board members, etc.? Are there any teachers here tonight, former or present? Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm so sorry. I'm Terry Decker. Yeah, moderator. Thank you for asking. I'm Terry Decker, moderator for this evening. Thank you so much. All right. I'd like to introduce Susan Leffler, one of the partners for democracy, who will give us a brief description of the partners. Thanks.
Hey, everybody. I just wanted to tell you a little bit about our background. A lot of you may well know. Transylvania Partners for Democracy began in 2024. Wayne Clark, a Transylvania County resident, had read about a group of people in eastern North Carolina who began meeting to discuss urgent concerns about the threats to our democracy. They decided to form Pamlico Partners for Democracy. The group included a retired judge, 2 ministers, a small business owner and former county commissioner, a financial planner, 2 retired teachers, an equipment manufacturer, a former school principal, a pediatrician, a retired law enforcement officer, and a former traffic engineer. Members were from both major political parties. Clark contacted that group for more information. He then gathered some Transylvanians who shared those concerns about attempts to weaken our democracy. Transylvania Partners for Democracy began with educators, the owner of a long-established architectural firm, a former president and CEO who founded several companies, a retired physics professor, a historian, and a former county development and strategic planner, among others. Transylvania Partners has continued to welcome local people committed to protecting our constitutional democracy through education, conversation, and political advocacy. Local political parties and advocacy groups are invited to every event. Legislative actions on a state and national level are threatening our local economy and every aspect of our lives. We began a year ago to organize public forums featuring informed speakers and panels to explore various aspects of our constitutional system and what is meant by the rule of law in this democratic republic. More recently, our forums have focused on agencies in the U.S. Civil Service, such as Veterans Affairs and the Forest Service, which have been decimated with massive forced reductions in staff and budgets. Tonight's forum on the current threats to American education is the third in the 2025 series.
Thanks, Susan. Before I introduce our panelists for this evening, just a little bit about the logistics for tonight. Each of our panelists will speak, and we'll deal with K through 12 first with the first two panelists, and then we'll go to higher education after that. After that, we'll enter a Q&A session. And to facilitate that, it would be very helpful if you have your questions already on a blue card. If you need a blue card, just raise your hand. We have runners. See Beata back here. She's happy to bring you a card. And we will bring them up here and we will ask them of the panelists. So look for your blue card, ask for a blue card, and please bring your questions forward. Our panelists for this evening, from left to right. On the left there, Carrie Norris. She currently serves as the Chief Academic Officer of Transylvania County Schools, following a long career as a classroom teacher and administrator. In the middle, Jeff McDaris, retired from Transylvania County Schools after serving as Superintendent of Education from 2008 to 2009 to 2023. On the right, on your left, Scott Sheffield, recently retired from Brevard College, serving as a professor of history and the former Vice President of Academic Affairs and Dean of Faculty. Thank you to our panelists. So glad you're here. Carrie. Carrie? Yeah, you can come up here. You can come up here. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I was just looking out, looking at former colleagues and teachers I've worked with over the past 26 years. So to understand, I'm up here and I'll field the questions. Is that what we're doing? Sorry. Okay. Oh, so I'm just speaking in general. I'm so sorry. My goodness. It has been a very busy day. Yeah, and really just here, honor that Dr. McDaris asked me to be part of this. I love to be part of anything where we discuss public education. The last panel I served on was at Brevard College, where I talked about the science of reading with other specialists within our district. So that was super exciting. As far as the topics surrounding traditional public education, I follow those as closely as I can, but I also have to keep myself grounded just in the work that we are doing daily with students and teachers and being reasonable. And by reasonable, I never want to have scare tactics and think that everything's going to be pulled away from us and we're going to have no one in our schools supporting our students and teachers. What I do know is that Transylvania County Schools has always done very well at being creative, using multiple different resources. I myself oversee technically 4 different departments within our school system right now. I'm wearing extra hats so we can put more resource back into our schools. And we would obviously do the same thing if we had any kind of cuts coming forward. Okay, sorry. And as far as the unknown, what has been put out there as far as federal funding goes, we simply just don't know. I met with our federal programs director today to make sure I was speaking accurately, and she actually just came from a meeting, and the people leading the meeting, which were from Department of Public Instruction, were just saying that we just don't know. And whenever we don't know in education, that's happened many times over my career. We continue to plan, we continue to put forth the things going into the school year, just as we always would. And as I just stated, if something did happen where a cut was in funding, then we would readjust and focus on the needs of our students. That's kind of an overview. So a lot of people always ask me in education, what are the main things that you are focused on right now, especially in my role with curriculum? And my number one response is always just that teacher retention. Because whenever we have the same teachers in our school system, we can give them training, we can do professional development, we can be active, we can support them, and we're able to build educators. Not everyone comes into the career being a natural born teacher. And so it's our job to grow and to guide them through. My second platform, I was just saying to these gentlemen, right now I'm on my standardized testing platform because we're in the middle of that right now. And I definitely am always in favor of accountability. We need to be able to measure what students are learning, and we need to know is what we are doing is working. Where are we weak? Where are we strong? But to test every student on the same test in a 3-hour test as we did today is just frustrating. So that's probably a topic that everyone across America agrees with, and I think that's always a good discussion to have. So those are just two areas that I'm continually focused on. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Carrie. Dr. McDaris?
Well, good evening. It's good to be here. It's good to see so many familiar faces. Spent a while this afternoon trying to find which closet my wife had put my nice dress clothes in since I retired. I finally found those. But in all seriousness, it's an honor to be here. And it's an honor always to talk about education, particularly in this county. It means a lot to me. Um, Grew up in this county. I went to school. I grew up in Cedar Mountain, rode the bus to school, and I went to the old Strauss Elementary. I'll tell you these stories. Went to right here, there used to be a building right next door. It was the old high school. I went to the junior high and then went to Brevard High School. And then I left to go to college down in Raleigh. I mentioned that because I would not have had any of the opportunities that I had throughout my career had it not been for the Transylvania County Schools. I was blessed with wonderful teachers. Carrie talks about teaching. I tell people, and there's a few people out here that might know who I'm talking about, but I used to tell people we didn't have the same level of standardized testing. But for geometry, I had Ruth Andrews, and you passed or died. So because she cared, and that was the important point. She cared, and so teachers in our county have always risen to the challenge. As far as federal funding, even though I'm retired, I keep up with a lot of things. I talk to superintendent colleagues, former and current. I do some work with the Western Region Education Service Alliance. So I try to stay up on things. I get up every morning, I read the news, and I try to read various news articles to try to get balance. We don't know yet what is going to happen with the federal money. I know there has been a lot of things flying around, but we don't know yet. I do think that it's very important to have these forums so that you start to pay attention so that you're aware of potential changes and how they could affect our school system. Federal funds are important to Transylvania County Schools. We utilize them to help a lot of students in need. It helps us hire teachers. It helps us with homeless students. It helps us with a variety of things. The federal involvement with education is nothing new. My background originally is in vocational education. Very proud of that background. Um, the vocational involvement, federal vocational involvement with public schools dates back to 1917. So there has always been in the land grant colleges before that with the Morrill Act. So there's been a heavy presence with federal legislation in our educational system for a very long time. And I don't ever want us to take that for granted. It's changed. There's some different things. There's some cautionary things that I might talk about tonight. One is the block grant. I don't know what that will look like. I honestly don't. I will tell you from experience that block grants tend to be less in cumulative total than all the individual streams were when they were combined. That happens very often. So I just think there are some things we need to be aware of. And then ultimately on the local level, we will rise to the occasion. And some of you out here are going to know this, teachers, educators tend to be our own worst enemies. And I say that because no matter what you throw at them, they're going to make do. Now, the naysayer could say, We'll see. They took that away and they were fine. But the thing you've got to realize is on the positive side and turn that around is what could we have done if we had not lost something? So those are the things you've got to keep in mind. It's an honor to be here again. Thank you so much for hosting this, and looking forward to it.
Our next is Scott Sheffield from Brevard College.
Well, my presentation is going to be a little bit more formal. I am a professor. So I actually took some time to really do an analysis of policies that I see that affect higher education. So that's what I'm going to try to do for you tonight, to give you a quick overview of what's actually being said and how I think it's going to affect higher education. In the first 4 months of the Trump administration, 15 executive orders, 2 just last week, have been issued that relate to the effect of that relate to or affect higher education in the United States. The Department of Education has been targeted for closure, with half of the staff having been let go. That's 2,000 out of 4,000, and 300 of those staff are federal financial aid officers. The entire federal student loan program is being changed, is in the process of being changed, including Pell Grants and federal work study, which is, we hear, being done away with visions of moving the entire $1 trillion system, federal student loan system, to the Small Business Administration. The federal research grant system has been overhauled, leading to decreased funding to cover institutional research, overhead expenses, and many grants are simply being canceled, often in midstream. And finally, there is the well-publicized attacks on major higher education institutions like Columbia and Harvard, based on alleged support of anti-Semitic and terrorist activities and policies with broad-reaching implications for academic freedom in academia, the status of international student populations throughout the country, and the tax-exempt status of private, non-religious college and university endowments. These are just some of the changes that the executive branch has made or is intending to make in higher education. Moreover, the current budget bill in Congress seeks to enshrine most of these changes into law, and in some cases make even more cuts and drastic changes. I'm asked this evening to summarize the effect of all this in higher education in Transylvania County in 15 minutes. Obviously, I can't summarize everything in that time frame, especially since specific effects in many cases are unclear at this point. So you have to settle for my impressions based on my experiences. And so without further ado, I'll try to give you some of those impressions. First, it's clear that most, if not all, the policy priorities and actions outlined in the executive orders and other administrative policies related to higher education align directly with policy statements and priorities of Project 2025. Administrative policies related to student loans, Pell Grants, and aspects of accreditation reform are often repeated in the executive orders or policy statements almost verbatim. More importantly, however, the anti-woke ideological underpinnings of many of the policy initiatives are clearly inherited from Project 2025. The Project 2025 portrayal of higher education institutions and accrediting agencies as bastions of the Great Awakening, infested with diversity, equity, inclusion, and Marxist ideology, permeates the executive orders and policies that directly and indirectly relate to higher education. This is most explicit in the executive order Reforming Accreditation to Strengthen Higher Education, which explicitly identifies DEI as illegal, discriminatory ideology. I have more to say about that executive order a little later. The executive order Restoring Truth and Sanity to American History also reflects this ideological crusade in its call for eliminating, quote, a distorted narrative driven by ideology rather than truth. This order is primarily limited to attacking and restoring the Smithsonian Institute, but the ramifications are clear. The narrative of American history must be controlled by the government, and only those interpretations of history, factual or not, should not and will not be tolerated. I'm a historian, so you know I wasn't going to leave that one out. Picking up on another theme from Project 2025, science must also be controlled according to this administrative executive orders. The executive order restoring gold standard science that just came out last week claims that over the last 5 years, confidence that scientists act in the best interests of the public has fallen significantly. A majority of researchers in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics believe science is facing a reproducibility crisis. That's a quote. As proof of this, the executive order cites the CDC's COVID-19 recommendations on reopening schools, one maritime whale policy, and the use of climate change worst case scenarios in a climate change study. Then the executive order argues for a new quote unquote gold standard for research that each agency head will then enforce. In other words, the government, and in particular government agency heads appointed by the president, will be deciding what scientific work is acceptable to use for making government policy. So much for the idea of independent scientific research guiding public policy discussion. So, how does all this relate to higher education? Over the next several years and beyond, in my view, higher education institutions of all kinds will have to operate in a hostile ideological environment that existentially challenges foundational beliefs about academic communities, primarily academic freedom and independent scientific research. The federal government traditionally has been a partner of higher education institutions in their pursuit of knowledge, through independent research, in their pursuit of empowering students both intellectually and economically through the knowledge and experiences they have at community college, and universities, and in their overall vision of themselves as institutions established for the public good and serving the public good. Going forward, it is clear that this administration does not share that vision of higher education and sees higher education institutions as dysfunctional and corrupted by DEI ideology, as failures at serving the interests of students, parents, and public interests, as bad business partners, irresponsibly spending federal grant dollars and student loan money. So, at best, in my view, the federal government, as represented by the DOE, the NSF, and the NEH, and other government agencies, are becoming, in a sense, unreliable partners in their traditional higher education mission to educate college students and the pursuit of independent research and knowledge. At worst, the federal government is engaging in authoritarian attacks on these institutions, like Harvard and Columbia, that stand up for the traditional institutional values of academic freedom, free speech, and independent scientific research, all of which are essential values of democratic society, in my view. Now, for a broad swath of personal reflections on what I see in executive orders and policies of the current administration and how they relate to the mission of higher education. When I look at executive orders and policies being put in place for higher education, I do not see that much that is supportive of what I and most of my colleagues perceive ourselves as doing. As a professor and administrator, like most of my colleagues, I have always seen myself as an educator of students, not an indoctrinator, who has engaged with students in the joint pursuit of knowledge and personal growth. This process is based on the principles of academic freedom and free speech. Yes, difficult, but fundamentally important concepts for higher education and democratic culture in general. When I look at the policies being espoused by this administration and their characterization of higher education in general, I don't see the words academic freedom or freedom of speech anywhere. I do see those institutions like Harvard and Columbia standing up for themselves based on these principles and being attacked for it. The instruments of executive power, both judicial and financial, being used to attempt to impose the government's will. As for teaching and higher education student success, I do not see any discussion of helping professors become better teachers, except in the use of AI. I do see most education research by the DOE being eliminated. I do not see any policies about helping students succeed in college or making access to college easier. I do see new Pell Grant guidelines that potentially make it more difficult for lower income and students to qualify, a looming Pell Grant shortfall that could lead to Pell Grant cuts, privatization of Parent Plus loans, and lots of uncertainty in general for parents and students when it comes to financial aid and how they will pay for college. And I can see students and parents becoming discouraged by this, and as a result, less students going to college. I see that TRIO, a program proven to help first generation college students, is on the chopping block, and that any student success program that references diversity, equity, inclusion in any way is or will be canceled. This all plays out over time. As this all plays out over time, the effects of this will be felt here in Transylvania County and everywhere, as fewer lower income and even middle income students attend community colleges, and universities. In my view, many college bound students in Transylvania County fall into the income brackets that require substantial financial aid, including Pell Grants and student loans, and often are first generation college students. I do believe they will be adversely affected by all these changes, as will the institutions that traditionally serve these students, community colleges, and yes, small liberal arts colleges like Brevard College. While we usually think of wealthier students going to private liberal arts colleges, the number of lower income and first generation college students that attend these colleges is significant. So, combined with the so called demographic cliff, the precipitous demographic drop in the number of college eligible students available to attend college of any kind, it will be a challenge for small liberal arts colleges and community colleges to maintain existing enrollment levels, in my view. The bottom line, in uncomplicated terms, the changes to the higher education system at the federal level are unlikely at this point to help community colleges and liberal arts colleges without large endowments. Universities face these same issues and the additional financial reality of dealing with significant cuts to research funds that will severely affect their budgets, which could result in dramatic removal of graduate programs, laying off of many faculty members, and lower numbers of graduate students. You combine this with the threat of removing foreign students, as we have seen with Harvard, the financial ramifications of the executive actions in higher education are clear, as is the message, do what we say or else. I want to mention two lesser known executive actions that may have escaped your attention. First, there's the executive order entitled Advancing Artificial Intelligence Education for American Youth. One of the good points, I think, maybe. I see the order addressing the need in higher education to figure out the appropriate use of AI. If some of what is stated in the order is actually done, it could go a long way to help us deal with this issue. However, what I fear is that this will become an unfunded federal mandate, implemented without adequate input from higher education institutions and without a full philosophical examination of the appropriate use and regulation of AI within a democratic culture. And it will simply become the AI oligarchs using their wealth and influence to dominate higher education. I have another. I was going to talk about another executive order, but I'm going to skip that one. It was about high-paying skilled trade jobs of the future, which has something to do with um, high school, high school, and with community colleges in particular. I'm going to skip that one. So, well, here's my final analytical point. though not really the end of my talk. Unfortunately, some of you are thinking at this point. It's clear that this is being drawn, that there's a distinction being drawn between accreditation and financial aid of all kinds, including the student loan program. To receive financial aid, colleges and universities must be accredited by an approved accreditation entity, like the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools Commission of Colleges, SAC-COC. To receive accreditation, among many other things, you must show compliance with federal higher education guidelines. In the executive order reforming accreditation to strengthen higher education that I mentioned at the beginning, the administration states at the beginning, accreditors have not only failed in this responsibility to students, families, and American taxpayers, but they have also abused their enormous authority. That was an opening salvo to an order that puts accreditation agencies on notice that they will become under intense scrutiny for DEI policies and any other unlawful criteria that are a part of their accrediting standards. Traditionally, the accrediting agencies, whether you like them or not, and many faculty members do not like accrediting agencies, have served as a self-regulating middleman between the government and higher education institutions. Institutions set standards amongst themselves, review each other periodically, make recommendations to one another to ensure each institution maintains academic integrity, upholds the principle of academic freedom, and focuses on student success. It is a process that is conducted amongst ourselves largely without government interference and has successfully, in my view, prevented federal and state governments from overly dictating educational policies, programs, and curriculum. To this point, federal and state interference in higher education policies, programs, and curriculum has often been minimal. This executive order signals that the rules may be changing and that the federal government would now be willing to use its accreditation approval power in an unprecedented way to enforce the policies through the accreditation agencies, and by implication, its approval of federal financial aid to higher education institutions. This may seem alarmist, but given what we've seen so far in the attacks on Harvard and Columbia, they are not necessarily so far-fetched. It is not a process that will happen quickly, I don't think, and even publicly in most cases. Like most of these actions, it will happen in targeted, technically legal, and bureaucratic ways. As an example of how this might happen, and is happening, let me describe what I've heard from a colleague in the state of Florida. He works at a community college in the state of Florida, which has undergone dramatic changes, and in some ways, Florida is the laboratory for what is going on at the federal level. First, they were mandated to change their accreditation agency every 5 years. So the leaders of his school were called to Tallahassee and informed they would be changing the accreditation agency. Since you can't change accreditation agencies without a real good reason, they were told to create one. So they would have to go out of SAC-COC and join another one. Next came a mandate from Tallahassee to identify and eliminate any and all programs or courses that were in any way related to DEI, and the syllabi of suspected courses were randomly reviewed. Then they put in a policy where students were given the right to complain about any courses that violated this policy. Then they started rewriting the general education curriculum with new alignment guidelines for all communications in Florida. In those general education guidelines, no course could be part of a general education curriculum if it did not reflect, quote unquote, Western canon or discussed in any way systematically race, gender, or other demographic systematic analysis. So no cultural geography. This led to the elimination of almost all sociology and anthropology courses and many history courses, like Black history, from general education. They can still be taught, but they cannot be part of general education courses. Students cannot use federal financial aid to cover the cost of taking courses unless the course is degree applicable, meaning it counts towards graduation. So students would have to pay for these courses themselves without financial aid, which means the students will not enroll in those courses, and therefore the courses will not be offered. In this process, the state education bureaucracy eliminates courses it deems unacceptable. With minimal faculty input, only a few representative faculty chosen by state education bureaucrats. You can see in this example the danger of how academic freedom and freedom of expression in the classroom can die out slowly and bureaucratically with a whimper and not a bang. It is this kind of environment that we find ourselves now in higher education. It's a moment of great uncertainty and potentially of great chaos as the explicit and implicit rules of higher education are not clear, and the traditional values of academic freedom and free speech are challenged. It's also a moment of great fear on several levels amongst faculty members who have to be more careful than ever about talking about any issues with their students for fear of being fired, of having academic programs being canceled because their fields of study are not appropriate, having their scientific and other research disrupted by funding cuts and ideological mandates, and fear amongst higher education administrators as they deal with the ever changing demographic, economic, legal, educational, and political environments that, on any number of levels, may threaten the educational mission of their institution and, in some cases, the very survival of their institution. In closing, let me say that we should not take our local institutions of higher education for granted. They will be facing great challenges in the coming years, and we should do everything in our power to support them. They are precious and valuable community commodities that uphold the values of academic freedom and freedom of expression in the classroom, values at the core of our democratic culture, and they seek to empower the students that attend them to be not only productive citizens, but knowledgeable citizens of our community, country, and the world. In fulfilling their educational missions, they serve as one of the cultural bedrocks of our community and the democratic culture of our country. As such, they deserve our full and unqualified support. Thanks for listening.
Lots of good questions. As I was scanning through these, there's some more to pick up, Brian. There's two or three on the motivation behind vouchers and the impact of vouchers should they become a reality. And it's a couple times they were directed to you, Dr. McDaris. Because please speak directly into the mic.
Okay. Can you hear me? Okay. Um, the issue of school vouchers, quite frankly, I'll throw it out there. There are people perhaps in here that are in favor of that. I'm not. I've never liked them. But part of it's an accountability piece. We are measured by many, many things in our public schools. The voucher programs that have worked in other states lack in accountability measures. The other piece of that is we tend to do the proverbial rob Peter to pay Paul. If they want additional types of schooling, then perhaps seek the funding for different types of schooling. What happens very frequently is that many students, not all, quite frankly, not all, but what they have found in other states, many students who accept, their parents accept the voucher, were already attending private schools. And then I'm going to throw something else out there that is just a reality, in my opinion. If you started just giving everyone a voucher, I can assure you, I believe this with all my heart, that there are some schools, some not far from here, that are private schools. Some of them have excellent credentials. They have a long-standing history of academic excellence. They will not accept your voucher. They will not let your student in unless they meet certain criteria. And the voucher itself may not cover the cost of the education. It takes money to educate any student. And if I have a classroom of 20 students, and then all of a sudden, 4 of them leave and take their monies with them, I still have 16 students. I still have to pay that teacher. I want to pay that teacher. I still have to get the materials and the books and to turn on the lights and do all that sort of thing. So if we're going to have vouchers, and that is a decision that the lawmakers will make, if they're going to have vouchers, I think there needs to be some accountability pieces built into that to make sure that we're not leaving somebody else behind.
Thank you. In a follow-up, thank you very much. Related to that is a question about the mechanics of vouchers. Do vouchers have, is it a zero-sum game? Is the kind of the nature of the questions, is that if you provide vouchers, that's money that's going away from public schools in a zero-sum way?
Yes, depending upon the time the voucher's used, there could be some partial payment, where they attended school for part of the time and then, but the voucher are used, I think they're moving toward awarding those at a uniform time. And so it would be money that has to come out of the overall general budget. And then by the time, if the state is, man, if I can answer this better, if the state is issuing vouchers to people across the state, each school system would be affected based on the overall amount of money available that they would have for public schools to be divided up among themselves. So that's a little bit of a gray target on what the specifics would be. For example, if 4 students leave today right here in Transylvania County, we know that's 4 students we're not getting state money for. But how does it affect if it's a student that has never attended our schools? How does it affect our schools or Henderson? That's a little hard to figure sometimes. I don't know if I answered that well, but.
Yes, thank you. All right, good.
Can I add really quickly?
Please,
Just,
Carrie.
just to state that, that we, as far as the school system, we cannot control vouchers and all of those things happening around us, but we do have a revised or newly revised district strategic plan. And one of those number one goals is to make sure that we are continually trying to be the number one choice for families. And so that's what we can control internally, improving the different services, the support that we offer, boosting proficiency, boosting growth, all of those things. So whatever else happens, or families are still choosing us over other choices for schooling.
Thank you. So some regarding, that was financial related. There's some regarding policy considerations. There's several of those. How much policy is dictated or mandated by federal, by state, and by local? How much autonomy is there locally, and what is perhaps under threat or under duress there?
Well, there used to be a saying that many superintendents would use is that if you took $1 of federal funding, it affected all the other rules. And there's a little bit of truth in that, quite frankly. North Carolina is a difficult state to follow funding. And also it's a difficult state to truly ascertain who controls education in the state of North Carolina. Depending upon the time frame and the lawsuit and other things, is it the state board? Is it the legislature? Is it the governor? It goes back and forth. There's a broad swath of people who have some sort of say in how we operate our policies. We have state board policies, but local school boards also have the flexibility to enact policies within a within a realm of things they've been allowed to control. For example, they could not violate federal law with a local policy. That would be a violation. So they are governed by state and federal laws and regulations. The state of North Carolina historically on many fronts has followed a lot of the same rules that they have modeled their rules after the federal government, but not in every case. So local boards do have some autonomy on implementation, but things such as curriculum and things like that are largely governed and managed by the state to a large degree. And then the federal government will have a say-so on funds that come to a school system. For example, a school system could not have a policy that we're not going to pick up certain students with a school bus. That would be in violation of federal transportation laws. Um, we also are governed by some things people may not realize, like the Division of Facilities Management that also regulates the hospitals in large part, like nursing programs. They regulate how many students we can have enrolled at one time in allied health professions in our high schools. And some of that is governed by labor laws through the federal government. So they all work in unison with one another, but in general, to be fair, if you accept any federal money as a state, which then flows into a local unit, it doesn't matter if it's the majority of the money or not, it's still subject to federal rules on expenditures.
Thank you. Relating to policy, also regarding K through 12, the anti-woke, anti-DEI initiatives that we hear a lot of news about, is it impacting our local schools now in any meaningful ways? And very specifically, would it impact how safe a gay or trans student would feel in the environment?
Well, I've been retired for 2 years, but I know prior to my retirement, I can't speak to some of the language out there as to whether things we did were considered woke or not. I don't know. I know that what we did, quite frankly, was we tried to be professional in that every student who came into our doors, we tried to make them feel like they were welcome to be in our schools, that they were going to be safe in our schools. And if you take care of the first two, then you can get to the educational piece. You can educate them. I don't know if any students, when I was in the classroom for 15 years, I don't know if any of my students fit any of the categories that are thrown about right now. I don't know. I know they were all my students, and I did my very best to protect them, to make them feel welcome, and to educate them. So I don't know that I can really answer that question in a manner that would lead one way or the other, because I'm not really aware of any of our teachers in Transylvania County schools that don't do what I did as a classroom teacher.
You want to add something, Carrie?
No, I was just going to say, as far as the question goes, and I'm not aware of any issues from this year. That's not a particular department I oversee, but I have not been aware of any issues within our students.
Moving a little bit to higher education. Uh, Scott, you mentioned Pell Grants and the potential for the lack of funding for students. Do you have a sense for how that might impact Brevard College?
Well, it will.
Oh, your microphone, please.
It will impact. Can everybody hear me? Yeah. It will impact with our college. I can't say exactly how much.
More directly. Yeah.
I can't say exactly how much. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but there are considerable, well, let's just say a significant population of students at Brevard College and the community colleges that receive Pell Grants. right? I know, again, it's surprising. People usually think, private liberal arts schools, oh, the only wealthy kids go there. That's just not true, right? Most small liberal arts colleges, a large majority, well, maybe not a large majority, but at least 50% are um, in dire need of financial aid. They cannot attend if they don't have it, in particular, Pell Grants and state state financial aid. Um, we hadn't even talked about that, right? And federal financial aid of various kinds, including work study. So, small liberal arts colleges are extremely dependent on federal financial aid for enrollment. If they cannot convince a student that they can pay for their education using institutional aid, federal aid, Pell Grants, work study, then they won't come. Right? So the more difficult that process becomes of convincing students who want to come to the small liberal arts school, largely because honestly, significantly, we have significantly more effectiveness when it comes to those students than bigger universities, then they won't come and they won't be able to come. Right. So federal aid in small liberal arts schools and community colleges is essential for the survival of a school. So, yes, any change to Pell Grant, even the rules changing, can have an effect where the parents and the students are confused about whether they can get it or not. Even a change of $500 in terms of qualification can make a huge difference in the mind of parents and students as they try to decide, well, where they're going to be able to go or if they're going to be able to go. Right. Um, that's something that's really not understood, that private liberal arts colleges attract lower income students and really do a better job of educating students. That's probably more than you wanted to know.
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate that.
Hard to get this
Back
thing
to
closed.
K-12. This is not necessarily policy driven, but I'm ignorant, so it might be some policy in here. Um, Scott mentioned AI and the advent of AI in education. This could be a boom, could be a bust. Uh, Maybe even before AI. What about social media? How is it negatively or positively impacted instruction in K through 12?
How many hours do we have? Well, this is my opinion. This won't buy you a cup of coffee. Social media is, I used to joke that, so it's not really a joke. I used to joke that social media was going to be the downfall of Western civilization. It's the keyboard warrior effect. You know, I have seen students outside of our schools when they're with family members sitting 10 feet from each other or less, texting each other. The postings on social media can be bullying, they can be detrimental, and it's getting increasingly difficult to really know which posts are accurate or not. People have moved into their own corners and they've chosen to believe what they want to believe. I was told one time that my Facebook page, which I started, by the way, just because I was trying to maintain the page for my class reunion. I've been told that my Facebook page is one of the most boring pages anywhere around. I wear that as a badge of honor, quite frankly. I do see some things, but I find that if I don't read them, I'm happier, quite frankly. So social media, you know, we do what we can in the schools to try to, no pun intended, educate students about proper decorum when you interact with people. That includes social media. Students are in school approximately 6 hours a day. I can't control the other 18, And so that's where we need the public and parents' help on that. And I think they've started to realize that. But more and more people are getting their news, their information from social media, which kind of leads into the AI question, quite frankly, and technology. And I've always been big on technology because I know that it can be used as a helpful tool. I will preface what I'm about to say that I still will always believe that you can never, ever completely replicate or replace the art and craft of a teacher in a classroom. But I will say that you are going to have to understand that at some point, AI generated beings are going to be a tool that co-teaches with that teacher. And I'm going to go out on the real limb of nerdism right here, but I'm just going to tell you. Technology is all about clock speed and how fast the computer can manipulate some numbers to generate something else. It's getting better. AI is getting better because it trains itself. And so that's one thing that I would hope that has the most tremendous bipartisan support in America possible is how do we get ready for this? Because we talk about it a lot. There's a lot of things going on. We're still not ready. I saw a demonstration in February where a person had typed up a sheet of basically a script, and it was just bullet points of information. They didn't say what had to be said specifically. They typed it up and they ran it through several AI programs, and what they generated was a radio talk show where two hosts were having a radio talk show like you'd be driving down the road, and they sounded very real. And this person then called in. She had created this and she called into her own show, and they stopped. They said, "Oh, we've got a caller." And they picked up and they had a conversation impromptu that was the AI was generating fast enough that it was staying ahead of what they could think of. And I say that because if you're a nerd like me and you remember the Star Trek, and you remember the holodeck where you walked into a room and you thought it was real, that's going to happen. I'm telling you, that's going to happen. They're moving closer to that every day. AI and technology makes mistakes, but it learns from itself. And so we need in our schools and also the general public to be very aware of AI and what we can do as citizens to try to make sure it's going to be used in a proper manner. And I can foresee a co-teaching situation where a teacher in the classroom exercising his or her art and craft has an AI assistant that looks very real and is there to assist in the instruction. And that should scare you a little bit because it does me.
Thanks.
I was just going to add to that, if that's okay. Just some different things about social media and AI. You know, we do at Transylvania County Schools work really hard, and we have standards where we teach the students to be digital citizens and how to analyze information on the internet, but also to be aware of what's real, what's fake. Going back to specifically social media, though, back to our district plan, and that's where we really, especially in leadership now, have to be advertisers and marketers, and we have to market our system. We're continually saying, how can we sell and showcase the great things that are happening? And that's just a difference in education. We never thought about that 15 years ago, and just sharing the good. We do have a local policy on artificial intelligence, a section on that, which specifically states that we do specific training for teachers first, which is what we are doing now. And then we train the students on how to use anything that they have access to in a productive manner. So I will say, working with Dr. McDaris for many years, he was always really up to date on the cutting edge technology coming. And many things you said several years ago have come to fruition. So you were right on the mark with that.
Comment on that. And
Please.
the executive order that I mentioned,
Right on the mic.
the executive order that I mentioned goes beyond, it's not just higher education. It actually addresses K through 12 and actually says we should be teaching students how to use AI when they're in first grade in kindergarten. So that it's an all-encompassing executive order that is going to lead to something. Not quite sure what, but it's going to lead to something.
A couple on higher education. The um, the recent publicity on foreign students and the review of student visas. Do you anticipate an impact on foreign students at Brevard College? How many are there, et cetera? Had a couple in that space.
Yeah, they've already been affected. Um, we haven't, as far as I know, I don't work there anymore. You understand, right? I'm retired, but I do know Debbie Dana, who's the vice president of dean of students, and we have quite a few foreign students at Brevard College. A lot of them play our sports or on our soccer team from Brazil. Debbie's husband's a soccer coach. That's how I know that. And there, so we do have quite a few, and it really does contribute to our geographical diversity that they have at Brevard College, that we have at Brevard College. So the changes to the visa process will make it harder. It's already hard for those foreign students to get in and out of the country. Sometimes they get stuck one way or the other. So if there's any visa issues, it will complicate their ability to come to Brevard College. Those students are normally full pay students. That means they get no financial aid institutionally or otherwise. If we lose 20 of those students at Brevard College, there's a huge financial impact. So, yes, this is true of many schools, including Harvard. There's a financial impact, a cultural impact to any problems or any issues associated with far as students coming in and out of the country, or in whether they're excluded or not.
Follow up for you, Scott, on related to the work study program, federal funding for work study. Um, it's been proposed that the budgets for that would be cut. What would what's the impact of that? What is it and what's the impact of that?
Well, I don't know the exact numbers of work. We have work study at Brevard College, federal work study. It's not a major part of Brevard College's financial aid packages normally. If you talk to my colleagues at Warren Wilson College, which is a work study college, if you look at their data on their 990 forms, which are the forms that all of us have that tell everything about us, all the data points, you'll see that a majority of their financial aid is, in fact, work study, a lot of which comes from the federal government. Not all of it, they have institutional work study. So, yes, it will have an impact. Again, it's one of those things where it's part of a package. And creating a package that convinces a student to come to the school is what we have to do. It's what all liberal arts schools, small liberal arts schools do. If you take one part of it away, it makes it more difficult for them to come and could affect enrollment. Right? Does that make sense?
Um, Back to K through 12. Actually, it may apply to Brevard College as well. Has there been any um, books banned or curriculum altered at K through 12 or at Brevard College based on federal or state mandates?
Carrie May can answer this. She's up to date on newer policies, but policies were in effect on how parents can challenge a book, and it goes to a review committee. And so, I don't, I'm not sure if I can recall any books. And then also you have to remember too that parents can request children not check out, be allowed to check out certain books if they're uncomfortable with that. That's the way the policy used to work. As far as that change on curriculum, I'm not aware of anything.
No, as far as our school system goes, we have not had any book challenges this year. Had a few requests for curriculum, which is totally the parents' right, and we've been able to do that. And we've not had any curriculum challenges as well. So open communication is what we're really aiming to do with families as they should be involved in the education. We want to provide that as much as possible.
And on the low, I will say this, in asking earlier about policies on, local control, that is one where the school board itself is an integral partner in developing that type of policy on the local level.
That's more local than state or federal. Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah, at the college, of our colleges, does not have the same um, policies as associated with the public schools. It's an independent private entity, so there have been no issues so far, right? With any questions about curriculum or books, academic freedom uh, is what books are used in a class is dictated by the professor and their professional opinion. Right? So that's what happens there. In community colleges here in North Carolina, you'll have to ask somebody there. I did describe to you, however, what's happening in the community colleges in Florida, where it is definitely being affected by this process that I described.
Thank you. A couple more local, definitely local questions, not so much national or even state, um, regarding K through 12, actually high school. Thoughts on school consolidation in Transylvania County?
Oh, oh, boy.
Or not?
Well, many people know that I was not in favor of consolidation for a very long time for a variety of reasons. It goes beyond the belief that it is somehow more efficient. Um, so what I did, I started hearing all sorts of things over the years of, well, if we did this, we did that. The only, to my knowledge, the only bond that was ever defeated in Transylvania County was 1969 and 70, and that was to consolidate the high schools. And it went down in flames. Of course, things have changed then. Back then, we had Acosta, DuPont, going gangbusters. Probably had, they didn't even measure dropout rate in those days, but even with that, we probably had 4,800 students in our schools. You had a lot more younger families, and so the conversation was, can we fit everybody into high school? And things change over time, as we know. One of the board meetings that we had before I retired, I guess maybe it was maybe a year before I retired, I've lost track now. I laid out all the scenarios for consolidation. I laid everything out completely because there were a lot of rumors out there, some true, some not. I just wanted to put it out there. There was this great myth of Walhalla High School that still floats around every once in a while. And if you've been down into South Carolina, you've seen it. It's a beautiful high school. It's beautiful. South Carolina's structure is a little different. They don't have the comprehensive CTE programs on site at a lot of their high schools that we do in North Carolina.
What's CTE?
Career Technical Education. Thank you. We have, only the military has more acronyms than education. Well, and so they take courses at local community colleges. But even that said, the land was, when they did that down there, the land was cheaper. South Carolina school boards have taxing authority. It was near a main highway. Water and sewer was more readily accessible. I could spend a long time going through that, but the reality was it was cheaper to have done then than it is now. And I used to get a lot of different reasons for consolidation. If someone wanted to talk about, and I had people that wanted to do this, if someone wanted to talk about consolidation from the standpoint of what can we do in terms of academic offerings to students, I'm fine to have that conversation, even though with the new technologies, there hasn't been a dramatic problem, but I'm fine to have that conversation because at least they're trying to think of the student learning. But that wasn't always what we had the conversations on. It went the whole gambit. Some people thought, well, that'll be cheaper. We can get rid of some teachers. And I would say, well, let's say I have an agriculture education program that has 18 students at one school and it has 22 at another. I still need 2 teachers. I still need the classrooms. So there could be some savings there, quite frankly. But there's also the fact that smaller schools, sometimes the students feel more involved. They feel more connected. So you have pros and cons. The one that I never really liked to talk about because it was, quite frankly, abrasive to me, were the people that came up, you know what, if we'll just combine the schools, by golly, we'll be a sports powerhouse. Maybe, you might, but you have to understand you're going to be playing bigger schools. And so that might be true, but I think we need a little bit more depth in our argument on that. So I did the analysis of all the different parts of that. You know, if we had the economy we had 40 years ago, we might be having a conversation of we needed the third high school. So you have to look at the root cause for why we're talking about having consolidation too. We are an old county. I remember some of you may remember Senator Apodaca, and I was talking with him one time, and he was doing a presentation, and we agreed on some things, we disagreed on one things, but I taught his son in Henderson County, and he was a great kid, and so I would talk to Senator Apodaca, and he would say, you know, in my district, the average age is comatose, and so the point being, we're an aging county. We don't have a lot of young people. We don't have, it's expensive to live here. So you have to take those things into the conversation, and you have to also look at the facilities. We passed a bond because we were trying to upgrade our schools. And so all that's part of the conversation. To get all around, instead of taking up the next 2 hours about your answer consolidation, here's what I would say. We need to make sure that if we ever do that, we do it correctly. You don't do bargain basement metal buildings. You do it right. Number 2, know all the facts and talk to the people of what that really means. Number 3, understand you might not get to be the Blue Devils anymore or the Tigers. You might have to have a new mascot. I don't know. And you've got to buy new uniforms and decide on colors and all that sort of thing. The other part is know where your population lives. I had some people say, well, you know what, if we just build a brand new high school in Cathy's Creek, it'll be good. It might be. But I always, some people said I was an equal opportunity insulter. And so what I said was, be careful what you wish for. I like 2 high schools for various reasons because of the small school, the identification, what it means, the legacy. I graduated from Brevard High School. My parents graduated from Brevard High School. My grandmother and uncles graduated from Rosamond High School. I had cousins go to Rosamond High School, so I know the argument. But be careful what you wish for because technically speaking, at the time I did the research, the population center of the county was about 1,000 yards from present day Brevard High School. I said, so be careful what you ask for. Do your work, do your research, and make sure you understand. Would it work? I would hope so. But if it ever, I still like 2 schools. I would still, to this day, like to be having a conversation right now about, man, we've got so many young people moving into the county. We've got so many jobs in a vibrant economy. We've got also, and this is not a criticism on any local entity because I know they're trying to reach that, but we're just not there yet. And so I would be loving to have this conversation saying, look, you know what? I've got 800 students at Rosamond High School and I've got 2,000 at Brevard. What are we going to do? That'd be a much more enjoyable conversation, but we're not there. And at the present trajectory, this is an important point. At the present trajectory, unless something changes, it may not be sustainable to have 2. I don't know. I don't know. That's not for me to answer. I still want to be able to walk into stores and not get shot. But I will tell you that whatever we decide, I hope that it is what is best for the students and we spend the money and do it right. Don't do it halfway.
There might be a few Tar Heel fans that would welcome the change of Blue Devils names. I'm just saying.
Well, we don't talk about North Carolina where I'm from, so.
Um, I don't think you can solve the housing issue in Transylvania County, but there are a couple of economic questions related to housing availability for young professionals like teachers that might also impact Brevard College. Do you feel and sense that I'll ask each of you to weigh on that.
Carrie can tell me, but when I retired, 30% of our workforce in the Transylvania County schools were living outside the county. It's 30% now. That's pretty significant. You can find
That's
what
for
you-
affordability reasons, you think?
affordability reasons. And you have to understand too, it's not just pure affordability. It's availability. There's just not available rental units in our county like there are in other counties. And so that's why it's important to think about, quite frankly, steer us kind of back around on some things. That's why it's important to realize how all these things work together, including federal funding. Federal funding allows us to hire some teachers. That we might not be able to hire and you know, us to advertise on social media about a great place to work. And it is a great place to work. And so get some people here and try to get them to, you know, to invest in the community with us. And so it all works together. But right now, it's not just an affordability issue that I'm aware of, it's an availability issue. There's just not that many rental units in Transylvania County. And so it does affect hiring and firing, not firing, but hiring.
I was just going to add to that. A common question whenever we do interviews is now, have you looked at housing and is it reasonable that you would be able to move here? And often, whenever we have asked that, they've came back later and said, I actually did just look at housing prices. There's no way. So have we lost some really great teacher candidates due to housing prices? Yes, absolutely. That goes back to that teacher retention, the teachers that we do have. I will say, and many of you are probably aware that we have, I wish I knew the group, Mr. Winchester. I'm sure there's a lot of other people involved. The affordable housing located beside Rosman High School. And that's going to, I think, have 3 structures there specifically for Rosman area teachers get first dibs, and then it would move into Brevard District. So we are really excited about that. Just last year, we were able to hire a teacher from, I think, in the Charlotte area, and he's a Rosman teacher, and he was able to find a tiny house in Rosman, so he was able to stay with us for hopefully 2 years. So the school system is really trying to be creative and constantly seeing emails going back and forth as far as this room is for rent, or we have this, the small apartment we want to open up to educators. So that has been helpful, but it is definitely an issue that we tackle.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, affordability and of housing is a huge issue for our college. I mean, I did 10 years of hiring faculty, and that was came to be the biggest challenge. When I came to the college more than 30 years ago, um, I'd say 80% of the faculty lived within walking distance of the college. Um, and used to come to events at night and come to the games at night and all that kind of stuff. When I retired, um, less than, gosh, I don't know, 30% live in the county. We have professors driving all the way from North Asheville, West Asheville every day. It's more of a commuter faculty, which change has been a real issue of culture at the college because we're small. You need to know the students. You need to, and we've done some things like allowing the professors to eat in the cafeteria for free, things like that, to try to keep that sort of connection between the outside the classroom. But it's you can't do anything now with faculty outside working hours because they're driving so far away. And when I tried to, I lost so many really good candidates because when they did look at the housing and the salary, you put those 2 things together, um, they just could not afford to do it. It's amazing, however, and it speaks to Brevard College's academic atmosphere that we have such an amazing faculty. If you know any faculty members, they're amazing, and they do stay um, largely because they've adapted to a 2-person household, working household, and they're committed to the type of education that happens there. But this is an ongoing problem, and it's one that Makes me glad I'm retired because it's not, I don't have to worry about that anymore because I worried about it a lot. A lot.
Thank you for that. Couple of closing questions here. And asked to both subject matters here. What is the most pressing issue facing our public schools and in our higher education? What's our most pressing issue?
Support. Sport's not just necessarily monetary support. We enjoy good support here. I don't know that that's widespread everywhere. Um, I guess I would just say that most pressing thing affecting public education is a myth that is out there that says our public schools are failing because they're not.
Yeah.
I was just going to add to that also that a lot of articles I read, we talk about teacher pay, student behaviors, just the pressures of everyday teaching can keep people from coming into the profession or staying. And I really think, like Dr. McDaris said, just really holding our educators up on the pedestal that they deserve. I think back to the COVID years. At that time, I was principal at Brevard Elementary School, and educators across the nation were revered and bragged on and shouted out and just praised. I remember seeing that on Facebook, and that doesn't always happen now. And sometimes we're our worst enemy as far as putting, out things that are negative about the education landscape. But really support across. I keep talking about teacher retention. That's a lot of different things, but we've really tried to be cognizant this year during our interview season that we're in right now of, what, if we don't have a high quality candidate, we're just going to leave that open for a little bit longer because we're not willing to take low caliber people that we wouldn't normally hire. We want to have the best. And then if we don't have a position filled, then we will work to support that in another way. So
Thank you, Gary. Good job.
Um, well, I mean, I would say a lot of the same things. I think the biggest issue for higher education in general now is the negative perceptions that are out there about what is being done at our universities, colleges, and community colleges. They're doing amazing things. They've been doing amazing research. We're leading the world in research. We're attracting students from all over the world, and somehow we're not good, right? And what the challenges to academic freedom that I've already talked about. That's a really huge thing. And independent scientific research. Now, other than that, at the smaller level, it's economic issues. It's affordability of education and reliable, consistent governmental and other support for students um, to have the opportunity to go to college and the belief that they should go to college. Not everyone should go to college, right? But we need to make sure that the availability of college is there if that is the right thing for any student at any time to do. As we know, it will be economically benefiting for them and personally beneficial for them.
And if you can offer some insights on where we could go to find good facts and less politics regarding the issues that face us in education.
Well, I would, you know, it's not easy to drive to Raleigh, for example, but if you've never attended a state board of education meeting, they're very interesting. If you've never attended a school board meeting, they can be very interesting. If you are prone to search things on the internet, try to find out all about your local public schools, for example, and all the good things that are going on. If you don't like social media, there are other ways to do that. Um, I would also invite people, I used to say this frequently when I was in my former role, I would invite people to attend school events. Quite frankly, you can see a lot about what's going on in the school by seeing the students and their involvement, because it's not just about pure academics. That's very important, and we stress that. But a school play, a concert, a an athletic event, those are ways you see a lot of, you see the youth of your county that you may not see in other ways. And so that would be one thing I would say, as far as a way to find out more about your school system.
Appreciate
And
that.
also reach out to people like Carrie Norris, who's still working and I'm not.
Yeah, can I have your social media account, Carrie?
For sure. I was just going to also say, for all of you that are here, you obviously care about education and our school system and just our community in general. And just today, I was meeting with the federal programs director. And right now, we have $6,000 in tutoring funds that we just were not able to spend. And that means that our schools could not find the volunteers to come in. Actually, not even volunteers, you get paid $25. We could not find the tutors, enough tutors to work with our students to spend those tutoring funds. So that's just one thing. I'm always a big advocate of Augustine literacy, and I know Judy is over there, Ms. Backhouse, and just it's an amazing, amazing program. If you ever want to give back, that's another way is to help tutor a student with literacy. As we become more literate, that is definitely the change maker. So
Very good.
as far as news outlets, I love EdNC. That's a big go-to for me. It's just very reliable, non-biased. Also, Edutopia is going to give you more of a national view at different things with educational trends. Dr. McDaris, when he was superintendent, made all of us get a Twitter handle, and I hadn't, well, it's called X now, but we had to get a Twitter handle, and that has really been great for me because I'm able to identify different practices. I will go to other school systems and get ideas. So that's been a good way to also stay current.
Name those again. Edutopia.
Edutopia and EdNC. There's a ton out there. Those are just two off the top
Thank
of
you
my
very
mind.
much. It's great. Scott?
Traditional sources on higher education are, of course, the Chronicle, and Inside Higher Ed, which I looked at least 20, 25 articles when I was doing my speech. And there's also, was it Business Ed? If you want to look at the business side of education. So those are well, for an outsider, they're going to be sort of hard to read because they are full of they're for professionals in the field, but they're reliable and they examine policies, federal, state policies, issues associated with higher ed in great detail. And the reporting there is usually factual and accurate.
All right. A couple of things. There is a petition that you saw coming in. You can grab that, and you can also scan the QR code that's related to the last topic we had on Forest Service and the impacts on Forest Service. Another petition is on the way regarding education, and these can be will be forwarded on to our representatives. If you have an interest in contacting representatives about any of these issues, if there's a really good app called 5Calls that makes it easy to do so. So educate yourself on the issues, and you can easily inform your representatives how you feel about those things through that app. Local, state. You can sign the forest petition online as well, not just the president. Very grateful for y'all being here tonight. The number of questions was voluminous and insightful, so thanks for that. Thanks very much for our panelists. Very much. We don't have a date yet. We don't have a date yet for our next session, but it's going to be on healthcare, Medicare, Medicaid, and that'll be probably in July. So stay tuned. Thanks so much.